Burgess here with Music Marketing TV. Today we are checking out PSP's triple meter. In here you have 3 meters. You have a VU meter, stands for volume unit. This is very good for averages. You've got an RMS meter, root mean square, again, good for averages. And then you've got a PPM, a peak program meter. Now, these 3 meters are all older standards, but they're very intuitive to work with. So basically a volume unit meter, what it does is it's been made in such a way to, or at least its intention is to replicate how humans hear, hence the volume unit. So this needle takes, the standard is it's going to take 300 milliseconds to come up and go down. So the attack and release, often referred to as the integration time, is 300 milliseconds. So if we give it something like a steady state signal, it's going to come up, hold at the value you calibrate it to. So in this case, I set it to have a reference level of minus 12 dB full scale. I'm going to ignore the voltages side since we're not using voltages here strictly. We're using, digital signals and dB full scale. But historically, these are tied to actual voltages, voltage measurements, and you would actually be able to adjust some of this and calibrate it how you want. And then, of course, there's standards that you would follow. But here, we're more interested in having a more intuitive setup. So the whole idea is you could put these meters up, and then if you had say you want to mix to have an average level at minus 12 dB full scale, well, this is how you could do it. So you could set this, and then we're aiming for 0. So this basically sets what 0 is. And so right now, this is exactly minus 12 dB full scale, or it's really close. So I tried to eyeball it. So you see right there, we're right there at 0. Now, this is a series of pulses, and these pulses all hit minus 12 dB full scale. However, the human ear doesn't hear this as loud because they're transient, they're very short. And also the meter, since it has to take time to go up and go down, these are not picked up very accurately at all by the meter. It reads a much lower average level, which is a little more representative of how we hear. Now, of course, this is going to not be so good when you want to check your peaks and avoid clipping. But this is a good way to just intuitively mix tracks in sort of a meaningful adjustment kind of a way. So a lot of people actually like to use a VU meter for this reason. Now, you can adjust the rise and fall time. If you just click on the name, you can come back here and change, all these sorts of things. And it should be noted that up here, you've got the global, the session, and the instance options. So if you change settings here, they could affect every type of this meter that you have instantiated in the session. You could have it so that, all future times you load it, it'll be changed. And you can have it on the instance. I tend to leave it on session or instance. I don't really mess with the global unless you want to change something permanently. And yeah, so you're just given a couple options back here. But the big thing to look at, right, is the integration time and the hold time. So that is what the VU meter is going to be. And when you're mixing with it, that's kind of what you're going to be looking at. Now we have the RMS meter. RMS is more tied to electrical properties than it is necessarily to acoustic properties. So that's why you will typically see a VU meter. But an RMS meter also finds an average and displays it for you. So you can get a sense of where things sit. This one, since it's not really tied very meaningfully to how we hear, we just go ahead and set the reference level to 0 dB full scale. So that's just like peak value. And then this meter also has a little peak meter built in. So these shorter regions are reflected more. Now mine's moving all over the place like crazy, right? So if I come in here, I've actually adjusted it a bit, but I've changed the integration time to be extremely fast and the fallback time to be very fast. So we could actually slow this back a bit. And I can't remember what this is by default, but I think it's like a little slower than this, but I set it to 0 because, I wanted it as a peak meter. But seeing it fall back isn't as useful. So I could increase how long it takes to fall back. That way I could just see where the peaks are sort of hitting. We can see we're hitting there right at minus 12. We also get a sense of the average. So you could use this meter and then just watch the black meter as an intuitive sense of how loud overall the track will be. So if you have multiple elements going on, the average level one is typically going to win out. And then, of course, you could use this to sort of check, make sure you're not going into the red. Because, that's going to be some clipping. That's pretty much the RMS meter in a nutshell. And then finally, you have the peak program meter. Now, these meters are kind of interesting. They're called quasi-peak meters because they're not true peak meters. Has to do with, again, historical stuff that was going on. And we, again, have new standards for this. But these are sort of interesting because they can pick up transients, but they can't pick up super fast transients. And this, again, has to do with the systems these were used in before. But as a result, you can get a feeling for transient information, but the fastest transients will just kind of, they'll just go through the system. These won't do a great job with them. You can actually click on the PPM meter to see the integration time. You can do this with everything and just adjust it as we saw before. So we see this is right now it's at 8 milliseconds. So anything between like 4 and 10 is kind of going to be where these live. If you want a true peak meter, not in the strict sense of like true peak with the intersample peaking and all that, just like it's a peak meter with 0 as the integration time, which would be similar to what your meters probably in your DAW are if you're still using peak meters and you haven't changed it to some other standard. So yeah, this will tell you. So this would be how you could check for peaks if you really want to. The standards though from ye old days are somewhere between 4 and 10. I think it depends on what you're doing. And again, yeah, you could use this. Now, these are actually going to, even though these are super short, this is nowhere near short enough to give this any sort of a problem. So you can see it picks it up just fine. And we're hitting right here at -12. And so it should be hitting right in the middle here at the 4. And it might be quite hitting there, but it gives you a sense of where things are hitting. So some extra things each of these meters has built into it, just by virtue of being a wonderful plugin, is you can go to mid-side view. So this is all mono information, so we'll only see mid stuff. There'll be no side information, but you can easily see how your side channels are doing with your mid. You can see some stereo stuff. You also have on the other side the ability to turn on a hold, which will just show you where your biggest peak was when it last fired. And you can also, instead of having it sit there forever, you can turn on the hold option, which if you notice in the back, there's this hold, and that just says how long to keep that there, essentially. So that's what those are. We can also use it. Let's say you want to make an adjustment right here. You don't want to have to come down here. If you turn on processing, you can make adjustments such as, you can change the gain, like so. And just a quick thing, if you turn the gain down and then turn off processing, this isn't going to apply still. Like if you play it, it's going to hit where it was before you turn it on. It gets cut. So the process needs to be active. This isn't like a thing you can freeze. This is more of a process or don't process control. It's not like a freeze control. Up next, we have filters. So you can turn on some filters. We have some 12 dB and 24 dB slopes. Over here, we've got 6 and 18 for the low pass. Turn these on. You can do a low pass filter. You can do a high pass filter. Stuff of that nature. And then finally, you can do a label. So last I used this was on the master track. It just remembers that. So we could put this on like, sine wave, because that's what this is. I really like the handwritten. It's just nice. I'm so used to seeing just, everything looks so formal. This was just a breath of fresh air. And that's essentially it. So it's a really straightforward, simple to use plugin. You just kind of have to know what you're looking at. The mid-side thing is awesome. And I really do enjoy mixing where I'm able to just set a level and use that as 0. It makes it much easier for me as opposed to looking at, a meter down here and seeing it hit low. It just can kind of be a little, it's just a little bit of a mind game because you see all that other space above it. It just feels satisfying to hit 0 and, above that's red, like, don't go over there kind of a thing. So this is like extra room you could use as opposed to, off limits clipping area. Whereas if you look at a meter and you see, you're hitting like -12 down here, that's fine. It's just a little bit of a mind game. And again, you want to use your ears more than anything. And I feel like this encourages it a bit more than this does because you constantly are thinking, oh, I've got more room. And then, the mix starts to creep. You get mix creep happening. But that is essentially it. If you have any questions about this, feel free to let me know. Subscribe and hit that bell icon for future videos. And have a blessed day.